The restaurant breathed wealth. It wasn't loud about it, no flashing signs or garish displays, but everything whispered money. The polished marble floors reflected warm amber lighting. Crystal glasses chimed softly. Conversation stayed low, measured, careful, as if the walls themselves demanded respect. This was a place where people came to be seen without ever raising their voices. Fear lived here too. Not the obvious kind. It lingered in glances, in how servers straightened their backs when certain guests entered, in the way managers hovered near the entrance during peak hours. Everyone knew why. Everyone knew him. When the doors opened that evening, the shift in the room was immediate. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Chairs stopped scraping. Laughter softened. A hush slid across the dining area like a shadow. He stepped inside without pausing, his presence heavy, practiced, unquestioned. His suit fit perfectly, expensive without trying to impress. His watch caught the light when he adjusted his cuff. The confidence he carried wasn't charm. It was entitlement, hardened by years of getting whatever he wanted. At the host's stand stood the new waitress. She had been nervous all day, though she hadn't shown it. First week on the job. High-end restaurant. Every move watched, every mistake magnified. She had memorized the seating chart, rehearsed polite responses, reminded herself to breathe. She stood straight, hands folded neatly, eyes alert. She looked up as he approached. "Table," he said, not bothering with courtesy. "Alone." Her fingers moved to the reservation book. "Certainly, sir. May I have your name?" He stared at her, slow and deliberate, as if measuring her audacity. A corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile, but something colder. "You don't need it," he replied. The pause stretched. A few guests nearby pretended to be absorbed in their menus, though their ears leaned closer. She met his gaze calmly. "I still need to check availability." For the first time, his brows drew together. Not anger yet, surprise. People didn't usually say things like that to him. "I come here every week," he said. "That should be enough." She nodded once, still professional. "Of course. I'll seat you right away." She picked up 2 menus and gestured politely, turning toward the dining area. He followed, his steps unhurried, as though daring her to rush. She led him toward a table near the windows, one of the best in the restaurant. As she reached for the chair to pull it out, he stopped. "No," he said. She turned back. "Is something wrong with the table, sir?" "I don't sit there," he replied. "I want the corner." Her eyes flicked briefly to the reservation chart in her mind. The corner table was booked for a couple arriving any minute. "That table is reserved," she said gently. "But I can check if—" He lifted a hand. "Listen," he said, voice rising just enough to carry. "Do you know who I am?" The question hit the room like a dropped glass. Conversations halted. Even the piano music seemed quieter. She felt the weight of every gaze on her back. She felt the warning in the air, the unspoken advice, "Don't push. Just move him." But she didn't step back. "Yes," she said. "And I still need to follow our seating policy." For a moment, no one breathed. Then he laughed. Not loudly. Not warmly. A sharp sound, edged with disbelief. "Well," he said, looking her up and down, "this place must be desperate." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. She swallowed, but her voice stayed level. "If you'd like, I can call the manager." "Oh, I'm sure you will," he replied. "But first, you're going to do your job." He walked past her and sat down at the window table anyway, leaning back as if he owned it. He crossed his arms. "Sparkling water," he said. "Cold. And take your time." The implication wasn't subtle. It was a test. A punishment. A reminder of who held power. She nodded once. "Right away." As she turned toward the bar, she felt her heartbeat hammering in her chest. Her palms were damp, but she didn't let her pace change. She had been watched her entire life. Judged. Measured. Dismissed. This wasn't new, It was just louder here. Behind her, the man watched her walk away, a satisfied glint in his eyes. She won't last, he muttered to no one in particular. The bartender noticed the way her hands moved, steady, precise, as she filled the glass. No shaking. No hesitation. Just focus. She returned to the table a minute later, the tray balanced effortlessly. She placed the glass down gently. Here you are, sir. He glanced at it, unimpressed. Finally, he said. Then, with deliberate slowness, he nudged the glass with his fingers. Water spilled across the polished wood, splashing onto the floor. A gasp rippled through the room. Oh, he said lightly. Careless. She froze for half a second, just long enough for anyone watching closely to notice. Then she reached for a cloth. I'll clean that up, she said. Of course you will, he replied. That's what you're here for. The manager hurried over, face tight with panic. Sir, I sincerely apologize. It's fine, the man interrupted. I'm just correcting behavior. Some people need to learn their place. The words landed hard. They echoed. Her hand stopped mid-motion. She straightened slowly and looked at him. May I ask you something? She said. The manager's eyes widened in horror. He leaned forward, amused. You're brave. I'll give you that. What makes you believe, she asked quietly, that you're entitled to speak to people like this? A murmur stirred. Someone at a nearby table shifted in their seat. His smile thinned. Because I can. The silence that followed was thick, charged, waiting. She nodded once, as if confirming a thought she'd been carrying all along. I understand, she said. Then she stepped back, not in retreat, but in preparation. No one knew it yet, but the rules of the room had already begun to change. The air didn't return to normal after her question. It stayed tense, stretched thin, like a wire pulled too tight. People pretended to resume their meals, but no one was eating. Forks hovered. Glasses remained untouched. Everyone felt it, something had shifted, and it wasn't over. The manager tried to smooth things out, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sir, please allow me to relocate you to the corner table if that's what you prefer. The man leaned back in his chair, satisfied. Now that's more like it. See how easy it is when people cooperate. He glanced at her again, slower this time, more deliberate, as if daring her to react. She didn't. She stepped aside while the manager scrambled to clear the corner table, apologizing to the arriving couple and offering them complimentary drinks. The injustice unfolded quietly, efficiently, money smoothing over discomfort like it always did. When the man was finally seated where he wanted, he crossed his legs and surveyed the room as though he'd won something. Bring me the menu, he said to her. And don't rush. I like to see effort. She handed it to him without a word. Oh, and you, he added, snapping his fingers lightly. You'll stay assigned to my table. I want consistency. The manager hesitated. Sir, she's new. Perhaps one of our senior. I said her. He cut in. His eyes never left her face. Unless that's a problem. The manager glanced at her, silently pleading. She nodded. It's fine. That seemed to amuse him more than anything else. As the evening progressed, he found ways to make her presence a performance. He sent food back untouched. Complained about the temperature of plates that were perfectly warm. Asked questions he already knew the answers to, just to interrupt her mid-sentence. Each time, he spoke louder than necessary. Do they train you at all? Is reading difficult for you? Relax, everyone, she's trying. Laughter followed. Not genuine. Nervous. Forced. A few people laughed because they were afraid not to. She absorbed it all in silence. At one point, she felt a sharp tug as he deliberately snagged her sleeve when she passed, sending silverware clattering to the floor. Oh dear, he said. You really should be more careful. She bent to pick it up. As she stood, their eyes met again. Say something, he whispered, low enough that only she could hear. I dare you. Her jaw tightened, just slightly. I'm here to serve, she replied evenly. Not to entertain. Something flickered across his face, annoyance, perhaps. Or the irritation of a game not unfolding the way he expected. Then do it properly. Time dragged. The room grew heavier with each interaction. Guests exchanged glances. A woman near the window shook her head quietly. A man across the room clenched his napkin in his fist. Still, no one intervened. When dessert menus were brought, he waved his away. I've lost my appetite, he announced. Watching incompetence does that. The manager rushed over again. Sir, please. He stood suddenly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Do you know how many people in this city depend on my investments? He said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the restaurant. How many jobs I create? And you allow this level of disrespect? Disrespect. The word landed wrong. It always did when spoken by people who had never been denied anything. She stood a few feet away, hands clasped in front of her, posture straight. I've been nothing but respectful, she said. A collective inhale rippled through the room. He turned toward her slowly, eyes narrowing. You think respect is silence? I think respect is treating people like they matter, she replied. The room froze. The manager stepped between them. That's enough. Please. But the man laughed again, louder this time. Hear that? She thinks she matters. A few heads dropped. A few shoulders stiffened. He looked around, enjoying the attention. Let this be a lesson, he said. Know where you stand. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she did something unexpected. She removed the pen from her apron and placed it on the table beside him. I'd like to clock out, she said calmly. The manager blinked. What? I'd like to clock out, she repeated, her voice steady. Now. The man frowned. You don't get to walk away. She met his gaze without flinching. I do. A murmur spread. Confusion. Anticipation. The manager opened his mouth, closed it again, then nodded slowly. All right. I'll handle it. She untied her apron carefully, folding it with precision, as though this moment had been rehearsed long ago. As she placed it on the counter, she looked around the room, really looked. People avoided her eyes. A few met them briefly, ashamed. She took one step toward the exit. That's it, the man scoffed. You run? She stopped. No, she said quietly. I listen. She turned back, reaching into her pocket. The room leaned in without realizing it. Whatever was about to happen, it was no longer his performance alone. The room felt smaller when she turned back. Not physically, but emotionally, as if the walls had edged closer to witness whatever came next. Her hand rested inside her pocket for a moment longer than necessary. The pause was deliberate. Silence, when used correctly, could be louder than shouting. The man watched her closely now, his confidence shifting into something sharper. He had enjoyed the spectacle up to this point, enjoyed bending the atmosphere to his will. But this was different. This wasn't fear. This was control slipping through his fingers. What is this? He asked, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. A dramatic exit? She withdrew her hand slowly and placed a folded document on the table. No flourish. No announcement. Just paper against polished wood. This, she said, is why I stayed quiet. He glanced down, uninterested at first, then frowned. He leaned closer, scanning the header. The color drained from his face in stages. Confusion first, then recognition, then something dangerously close to panic. Across the room, a woman at a nearby table noticed the change and straightened. So did the bartender. So did the manager, whose eyes darted between the paper and the man's tightening grip. You think you can scare me with a piece of paper? The man said, though his voice had lost its edge. She didn't answer him. Instead, she addressed the room. Some people believe power is loud, she said calmly. That it announces itself. That it humiliates others to remind them who's in charge. Her voice carried, not raised, just clear. But real power, she continued, listens. It watches. It waits. The manager swallowed hard. What's going on? She turned to him. I applied for this job 6 weeks ago under a temporary identity. I needed to observe how influence behaves when it thinks no one important is watching. A low murmur spread through the restaurant, rippling from table to table. The man stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. This is insane, he snapped. You don't know who you're dealing with. She looked at him then, fully, for the first time since she'd arrived. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, she said. And so will everyone else. She reached into her pocket again and removed a small recorder, setting it beside the document. For months, she said, you've used money to silence people. Servers. Employees. Business partners. You count on fear to erase witnesses. Her eyes never left his face. You forgot one thing. His jaw clenched. Which is? Fear makes people quiet, she said. But it also makes them observant. The manager stepped back slowly, as if suddenly unsure where to stand. The man's laugh came out brittle. You expect these people to testify against me? She shook her head. No. She gestured subtly around the room. They already have. A stunned hush followed. She pressed a button on the recorder. His own voice filled the space, mocking, cruel, unmistakable. Comments from earlier that evening. Insults. Threats. Laughter. Each word echoed louder than it had when first spoken. Some guests gasped. Others stared openly now, no longer pretending to look away. The man reached for the recorder, but she was faster, sliding it back out of reach. Touching evidence won't help, she said evenly. It never does. You can't do this, he hissed. Do you know what I'll do to you? She leaned forward slightly. Do you know what you already did to yourself? For the first time, uncertainty cracked his posture. His shoulders stiffened. His gaze flicked toward the entrance, then back to her. This is a setup, he said loudly, trying to reclaim the room. She provoked me. Did I? She asked. Or did you speak exactly the way you always do when you believe there are no consequences? The question lingered, unanswered. A man near the back stood suddenly. I heard him, he said, voice shaking but firm. Everything. Another voice followed. So did we. Then another. And another. What had been fear turned into momentum. The manager exhaled slowly, realization dawning. You're not staff. She smiled faintly. Not tonight. The man backed away from the table, his confidence unraveling in real time. You think this ends me? She straightened. No. Your behavior did that long before I walked in. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Someone near the window turned their head. They're early, she said softly. I expected them 10 minutes from now. The man froze. Early for what? He demanded. For accountability. The doors at the front of the restaurant opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, scanning the room with calm precision. The room exhaled as one. The man didn't speak as they approached him. He couldn't. The weight of the moment pressed the words out of him. Sir, one officer said evenly, we're going to need you to come with us. His gaze locked on her, eyes wide, searching for leverage, for mercy, for anything. You planned this, he whispered. She met his stare, unflinching. I prepared for it, she replied. There's a difference. As they escorted him toward the exit, he struggled once, then stopped. The fight was gone. What remained was disbelief. As the doors closed behind him, the restaurant stood frozen, then slowly came back to life. No applause yet. Just stunned silence. She picked up the folded apron from the counter and held it for a moment, then placed it neatly beside the register. Someone finally spoke. Who are you? She looked around at the faces, no longer afraid, just curious. I'm someone who listens when people think they're invisible, she said. And for the first time all night, the room felt like it could breathe again. The silence after the doors closed felt heavier than anything that had come before it. It wasn't fear this time. It was shock, pure, unfiltered, pressing against the walls like a held breath. Plates sat untouched. Glasses trembled faintly as someone's hand finally lowered to the table. The piano music had stopped without anyone noticing when. She remained where she was, standing near the counter, posture relaxed now, as if a weight she'd been carrying for months had finally been set down. The authority in her presence no longer came from restraint or tension. It came from certainty. The manager was the first to move. He straightened slowly, smoothing his jacket with hands that still shook. He looked at her with something close to awe, mixed with shame. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "If I had." She lifted a hand gently. "You knew enough," she replied. "You just didn't feel safe acting on it." That truth landed softly, but it landed. Around the room, people began to stir. Chairs scraped back. A woman near the windows wiped her eyes, embarrassed to be seen crying. A man who had laughed earlier stared down at his plate, jaw tight, as though replaying his own silence. Someone started clapping. It was tentative at first, one pair of hands, then another. The sound grew, filling the room with something unfamiliar. Not approval. Not celebration. Relief. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She waited until the noise faded on its own. "You don't need to applaud," she said. "You just need to remember what it felt like to hear him talk when you couldn't stop him." That quieted the room faster than any raised voice could have. The bartender stepped forward. "He's been like that for years," he said. "Everyone knew. No one wanted to be the one." She nodded. "There's always a first." The officers returned briefly, one of them approaching her with a respectful nod. "We'll be in touch for your statement." "Of course," she said. As they left, the weight of finality settled in. This wasn't theater anymore. This was consequence. She reached for her coat, slinging it over her arm, when the woman who had been reassigned from the corner table earlier stood up. "I'm sorry," the woman said, her voice thick. "We let it happen." She met her gaze. "You're here now." That seemed to be enough. As she walked toward the exit, the manager followed a few steps behind. "You could have destroyed this place," he said. "Taken us down with him." She paused at the door and looked back. "Places don't rot overnight," she replied. "They decay when people stop believing they can be better." The cool night air greeted her like an exhale. The city hummed beyond the glass, cars passing, lights flickering, life moving forward without pause. She stepped onto the sidewalk, letting the door close behind her. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel tired. Across the street, a small crowd had gathered. News traveled fast when power fell. Phones were already raised. Whispers moved like wind. She kept walking. Behind her, inside the restaurant, something subtle but irreversible had shifted. Conversations resumed, but not the same ones. Voices were steadier. Eyes met more often. Fear had lost its grip, and everyone could feel the space it left behind. Later that night, as she sat alone in her car, the city lights reflecting faintly off the windshield, her phone buzzed. A message. Then another. Witness confirmations. Statements. A timeline tightening into something undeniable. She leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. She thought of the countless times she had stood in rooms like that, restaurants, offices, boardrooms, listening. Watching people shrink themselves. Watching silence protect cruelty. Tonight, silence had failed. Her phone buzzed again. A final message, short and simple. "He's talking." She smiled, not out of satisfaction, but recognition. Truth always loosened tongues eventually. The next morning, headlines would name him. They would list numbers, charges, quotes. Analysts would debate how someone so powerful could fall so quickly. They would miss the point. Power didn't fall because she confronted him. It fell because everyone saw him clearly at the same time. Weeks later, the restaurant would still serve the same dishes, polish the same glasses, greet guests with the same warmth. But there would be changes, small at first. A manager stepping in sooner. A server speaking up without apologizing. A laugh that wasn't nervous. And every once in a while, when someone difficult raised their voice just a little too loudly, someone else would meet their eyes and say, calmly, "That's not acceptable here." She would never return to that restaurant. She didn't need to. What she left behind wasn't fear. It was memory. And memory, once planted, was louder than any millionaire who ever thought silence belonged to him.